My father and I hadn't spoken in 8 years when the lawyer called to tell me he'd passed. Heart attack. Quick and clean, they said. Like that was supposed to make it better. Like the way someone leaves matters more than the fact that they're gone. I didn't cry. Couldn't, really. You can't mourn someone you've already buried in your mind years ago. I just sat there, in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the coffee that had gone cold while the lawyer droned on about estate settlements and legal proceedings. Mr. Brennan specified in his will that you're the sole beneficiary, the lawyer said. His name was something pretentious, Whitmore or Whitfield. The estate is substantial. We'll need you to come to Sacramento to sign the paperwork. Substantial. That was the word he used. Like my father's entire life could be reduced to a dollar amount that made the 3-hour drive worth my time. I told him I'd think about it and hung up. My wife Sarah found me still sitting there 20 minutes later. She put her hand on my shoulder, squeezed gently. We'd been married for 12 years, together for 15. She knew the shape of my silences by now. "You okay?" she asked. "He left me everything," I said. "The house, his accounts, everything." "Are you gonna go?" I looked up at her. "Do you think I should?" She sat down across from me, picked up my cold coffee, dumped it in the sink, started making a fresh pot. That's who Sarah was. She fixed the small things while you figured out the big ones. "I think," she said carefully, "that you'll regret it if you don't. Not because of the money, but because you'll always wonder." Wonder what? I didn't ask. Didn't need to. I'd been wondering for 8 years why my father stopped returning my calls after my second deployment, why he missed my daughter Emma's birth, why he sent a check instead of showing up for my homecoming. 3 days later, I made the drive to Sacramento alone. The house looked exactly the same. Red brick, white shutters. The oak tree in the front yard where I'd built a treehouse when I was 9. My father had helped me, I remembered, back when he still knew how to be a father instead of whatever he became later. Whitfield, I'd checked the paperwork, that was his name, met me at the door. Younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of expensive suit that told you he handled estates worth paying attention to. "Mr. Brennan," he said, shaking my hand, "thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult." I didn't correct him about it being difficult, just followed him inside. The house smelled wrong. Not bad, just absent, like no one had cooked a meal or tracked in mud or lived any kind of real life here in years. Everything was clean, organized, untouched. My father had always been particular, but this felt different, sterile. "Your father was very specific about his wishes. He left detailed instructions for the distribution of his assets, the house, his investment accounts, his life insurance. It all transfers to you. We've prepared all the paperwork." He gestured to a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my first car. Papers were stacked neatly, little colored tabs marking where I needed to sign. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "The total estate value is approximately $4.3 million. I sat down hard in the leather chair. $4 million? "Your father was quite successful in his investments," he said. He had the tone of someone who'd said this before to other shocked beneficiaries. "He worked primarily as a consultant for various defense contractors, very lucrative field, especially during the war years." War years, like they were seasons. Winter, spring, summer, war. I'd served 2 tours in Iraq, 2006 to 2007, then 2008 to 2009. Infantry, the kind of boots-on-ground, door-kicking, checkpoint-running work that made you old fast. I was 38 now, but felt 50. "I didn't know he was doing that well," he said. "He kept his business affairs quite private in his final years," he said. "He gave very specific instructions about what should happen after his passing. This was one of them." After Whitfield left, I sat in my father's study for a long time, just looking around. The walls were covered with bookcases, full of hardcovers I'd never seen him read. Military history mostly, biographies of generals, analysis of campaigns from wars I'd studied in basic training.
Above the desk hung a photo I'd forgotten existed. Me in my dress uniform, fresh out of boot camp, 20 years old, skinny, grinning like I'd won the lottery. My father stood next to me in the picture, his hand on my shoulder. He was smiling too.
I remembered that day. He'd driven down to Camp Pendleton for my graduation, told me he was proud, told me I was doing the right thing, serving my country. It was the last time I remembered him looking at me like that, like I was his son, instead of a stranger he used to know. The safe was built into the wall behind a painting of some Civil War battle. Gettysburg, maybe. I pulled it aside, entered the combination from the envelope. Inside were 3 things: a stack of folders bound with rubber bands, a sealed envelope with my name on it, and an old photograph. I picked up the photograph first. It showed my father, much younger, in a suit, shaking hands with someone I didn't recognize. They stood in front of a building with columns, official looking. Washington, probably. My father looked happy, successful, the kind of man who knew important people. The envelope felt heavy. I tore it open. Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things. But mostly, I'm sorry for what you're about to learn. The folders contain documents that will explain why certain things happened the way they did, why you were deployed when you were deployed, why your unit was sent where it was sent, why I stopped talking to you. I made choices, son. Choices that kept you alive, but cost us everything else. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it. I just need you to understand that everything I did because I loved you more than I loved myself. The money is yours. Use it to take care of Sarah and Emma. Use it to build the life I stole from you. And please, please don't do what I would do with what you're going to find in these folders. Dad. My hands shook as I set the letter down and reached for the folders. The first folder contained deployment orders. Not just mine, dozens of them. Different units, different dates, all stamped with official Department of Defense seals. I flipped through them, confused. Why would my father have these? Then I saw my name. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Deployment to Ramadi, Iraq. January 2006. Clipped to my deployment orders was a contract. Defense Solutions International, dated November 2005, a military logistics contract for $47 million to provide supply chain management and security consultation for Marine units operating in Anbar Province. I read it twice, 3 times. The signature at the bottom was small, neat, familiar from 1,000 birthday cards and Christmas checks. Thomas Brennan, my father. Before I tell you what I found in the rest of those folders, if you're hooked on this story, hit that like button and subscribe. There are dozens more voices like mine here. And drop a comment with your country. I'm curious where all of you are listening from. The second folder was thicker. Financial statements, wire transfers, emails. My father hadn't just consulted for Defense Solutions International. He'd been a partner. One of the founding investors when they formed the company in 2004. The emails were worse. Tom, attached are deployment schedules for Q1 2006. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, confirmed for Ramadi. Spoke with Colonel Hendricks, he's on board. This puts us in position for the checkpoint supply contract. We're looking at 70 to 80 million over 18 months if we execute correctly. Richard. Tom, good work. Make sure the battalion needs what we're selling. You know how to make that happen. Tom. Supply requisitions from 3rd Battalion came through today. $4.2 million in urgent orders for equipment that won't ship for 6 weeks. Hendricks delivered exactly what we discussed. Your son's unit is going to make us both wealthy men. Richard. I stopped reading, stood up, sat back down. My chest felt tight, like someone had their hands around my lungs. My father had sent me to war,
not directly, but close enough. He'd invested in a company that made money from military contracts. Then he'd helped steer deployments, my deployment, to places where those contracts would be most profitable. The equipment we'd waited for in Ramadi, the supplies that came late or came wrong, the body armor that didn't fit right, the radios that cut out, the vehicle parts we requisitioned 3 times before they showed up. All of it had gone through companies my father owned pieces of. We joked about it sometimes, sitting in the Iraqi heat waiting for gear that should have arrived weeks ago. Some contractors getting rich while we're getting shot at. Gallows humor. The kind of jokes you make when the alternative is screaming. Turns out, we'd been right. I made it to the bathroom before I got sick. Sarah called around 8. "How's it going?" I was sitting on my father's back porch, staring at his perfectly maintained garden. The folders were stacked on the table beside me. I'd read through them all twice. Bank statements showing deposits of $800,000, $1.2 million, $670,000, all tied to contracts that serviced units in Iraq. My units. My friends. Sarah's voice pulled me back. "Marcus, you still there?" "Yeah, sorry." "Did you finish with the lawyer?" "Yeah." "How much?" $4 million, give or take." She was quiet for a moment. Wow. "Yeah. You don't sound happy about it." I looked at the folders. I found some stuff in his safe. Documents. "What kind of documents?" "The kind that explain things." Another pause. "Explain what?"
I almost told her. Almost said, my father was a war profiteer who made millions off the deployments that nearly got me taken out, who helped orchestrate where and when Marines like me got sent so his companies could fill the supply contracts, who traded his son's safety for money. Instead, I said, "I'll tell you when I get home. It's too much for the phone." "Are you okay? You sound—" "I'm fine, just tired. It's been a long day." "Come home tomorrow," she said. "Whatever's there can wait." But it couldn't. That was the problem. The third folder had names. Not just my father's business partners at Defense Solutions International, but others. Politicians, officers, procurement officials, men with power and connections who'd been on my father's payroll in one way or another. Some of the names I recognized from the news. Senators who'd pushed for increased military spending, generals who'd advocated for troop surges, civilian administrators in the Department of Defense. And then I found the email from my father to someone named Victoria Reyes, dated March 2007, right after my first tour ended. "Victoria, Marcus made it home, thank God. But they're talking about sending his battalion back in 2008. I can't do this again. Can't sit here knowing I put him in danger for profit. I'm out, effective immediately. I'll sell my stake back to the company at the price we discussed. I want no part of this anymore. Tom." "Tom, you understand that walking away means we can't protect him anymore. Hendricks made sure 3rd Battalion got favorable assignments last deployment. Quiet sectors, good intel. That was because of your influence. If you're out, Marcus goes wherever the Corps sends him, and we both know where they're sending Marines in 2008. Think about that. Victoria." "Victoria, I've thought about nothing else for 2 years. I'm out. Don't contact me again. Tom." My second deployment had been rough. We'd lost 4 guys: Rodriguez, Miller, Chen, Davidson. Good men, friends. Rodriguez had 3 kids. Miller was supposed to get married when he got home. We'd been assigned to patrol routes in Solder City that everyone knew were bad, ambush territory. Our platoon leader, Lieutenant Hayes, had fought the orders, said we were undermanned, said we needed better intel. Got overruled. So we went. I remembered coming home in 2009, broken and angry and unable to sleep. Remembered calling my father, needing to hear his voice, needing to tell someone what I'd seen. He hadn't answered. For weeks, he hadn't answered. Now I knew why. Now here's where everything changed. But real quick, if you're invested in how this ends, I genuinely appreciate a subscription. More soldier stories drop daily.
Comment your country below. Always amazes me how far these reach. I stayed in Sacramento for 3 days. Couldn't bring myself to leave. Couldn't figure out what to do with what I knew. The rational part of me understood why my father had cut me off. Guilt, shame, the weight of knowing his money had been built on the backs of men like me while he sat safe at home, that he'd only gotten out after I'd already served 1 tour, after he'd already made his fortune. The other part of me, the part that carried Rodriguez off that street in Solder City with half his face gone, that part wanted to take everything I'd found and burn my father's legacy to the ground. On the 3rd day, I called Sarah. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not try to talk me out of what I'm thinking. Marcus, you're scaring me. My father made his money off the war, off my war. He was part of a group that influenced deployments to profit from supply contracts. He's the reason I went to Ramadi, the reason my unit needed so much gear, because they made sure we'd need it, then made sure they were the ones selling it to us. Silence on the line. Sarah? I'm here. Her voice was tight. I'm just processing. I have documentation, emails, contracts, bank transfers, evidence of corruption that goes up to the Senate level, procurement fraud, influence peddling, all of it. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? I had enough evidence to destroy reputations, end careers, maybe even trigger criminal investigations. I could expose the whole network of people who treated the war like a business opportunity, while men I knew gave everything. I could go to the media, I said, or the FBI, someone who'd know what to do with this. But my father's name is all over it. If I expose this, I expose him too. Everything he built, his reputation, his legacy, it all goes up in smoke. And that money he left us, it's blood money. Every dollar came from someone's suffering. Then we don't take it, she said immediately. We walk away. I knew she'd say that. It was one of the reasons I loved her. Sarah saw things in black and white in a way I'd stopped being able to after Iraq. It's $4 million, I said. Emma's college fund, our retirement, the house repairs we've been putting off, a life where we're not paycheck to paycheck. I don't care, she said. I know you don't, but I do. I'm tired, Sarah. Tired of barely making ends meet. Tired of working construction jobs that destroy my back. Tired of being the guy who served his country and came home to nothing. You came home to us, she said. I know. But doesn't Emma deserve better than hand-me-down clothes and a father who can't afford to take her to Disneyland? Don't do that, Sarah said. Her voice was sharp now. Don't make this about Emma. This is about you deciding whether you can live with yourself if you take that money. She was right, but I didn't know the answer to that question.
I met with an investigative journalist named Patricia Chen 3 weeks later. I'd found her through careful research, someone with a track record of exposing military contractor fraud, someone with the credibility to take this story mainstream. We met at a coffee shop in San Francisco, far from Sacramento, far from anyone who might recognize either of us. I'd brought copies of everything in my father's safe. She'd brought a recorder and a legal pad. "This is substantial," she said after I'd explained what I had. "This could bring down multiple defense contractors, force congressional investigations, expose a pattern of corruption that—" She stopped. "Why are you hesitating?" "What? You're hesitating. I can see it. You want this story out there, but something's holding you back." I stirred my coffee. "My father's name is all through these documents." "I know. You mentioned that." "He's gone. Can't defend himself. Can't explain his side. I'm about to destroy a man who isn't alive to face the consequences." Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Do you think he deserves protection?" "No. Yes. I don't know." I looked at her. "He was my father, and he was a war profiteer who traded on the lives of men like me. Both those things are true. I'm just not sure which one matters more. What does your wife think?" "That I should expose everything and refuse the inheritance. But you're not going to do that." It wasn't a question. She could read me too easily. "I don't know what I'm going to do," I said. "I keep thinking about Emma, about giving her the opportunities I never had,
about Sarah not having to work 2 jobs, about us finally having security. "Blood money," Patricia said softly. "Yeah. Do you know what the men who didn't make it home would say?" I looked at her. "What?" "They'd probably tell you to take care of your family. That's what soldiers do, take care of their own." "With money that came from their sacrifice?" "With money that exists whether you take it or not. Your father already made it, already profited from the war. You refusing it doesn't change that, doesn't bring anyone back, doesn't make it right. All it does is leave your daughter without a college fund." I hadn't expected her to argue for keeping the money. I'd expected judgment, moral clarity. Instead, she was giving me permission to be selfish in a way that felt both wrong and necessary. "If I take the money," I said, "I can't expose this. It's too hypocritical. I can't profit from it and condemn it at the same time." "So you're choosing between your father's legacy and your daughter's future." "I guess I am." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "For what it's worth, I think you've already decided. You just don't want to admit it." She was right. I need to tell you what happened next, but first, if this story's got you, show some love with a like and subscribe. I read every comment, especially love seeing where you're all from around the world. I burned the documents 2 days later. Not all of them. I kept copies locked in a safe deposit box under Sarah's name. Insurance, maybe, or just the inability to completely let go. But the originals, all the emails, contracts, bank transfers, deployment orders, I fed them into the fireplace at my father's house and watched them turn to ash. Sarah didn't speak to me for 3 days when I told her. "You're keeping the money," she said, finally, standing in our kitchen, arms crossed, "after everything you found." "Yeah." "Why?" "Because I'm tired. Because Emma deserves better. Because those men are already gone and nothing I do will bring them back. Because my father left me this money. And maybe it was his way of trying to make things right." "You don't believe that?" "No, but I want to." She shook her head. "I love you, Marcus, but I don't know if I can respect this decision." "I know. We could have managed. We have managed." "I know that too. But I don't want to just manage anymore. I want Emma to have what she needs. I want us to stop worrying about every unexpected expense. I want to give you the life you deserve for putting up with me all these years. You didn't marry me for money." "I know. But you married a man who came back broken from a war that made my father rich. Doesn't that give me some right to take what he left?" Sarah looked at me for a long time. "That's rationalization, Marcus. That's you trying to make this okay when it's not." "Maybe, but it's what I'm doing anyway." She left the kitchen. I heard her crying in our bedroom an hour later. I didn't go to her, couldn't face seeing what I'd become in her disappointment. We moved into my father's house 6 months later. It was practical, big enough for Emma to have her own room, good school district, already paid for. Sarah agreed to it, though I could see the judgment in her eyes every time she walked through the door. I tried to be a better man with the money. Set up a scholarship fund for children of combat veterans, donated to organizations that helped wounded soldiers, wrote checks to the families of Rodriguez, Miller, Chen, and Davidson, not enough to explain, just enough to claim it was from my father's estate. None of it made me feel less dirty.
Emma started at her new school and loved it. Made friends immediately, joined the soccer team, talked about wanting to be a veterinarian. Sarah's parents visited for Thanksgiving and commented on how well we were doing, how proud they were that we'd finally achieved stability. I smiled and nodded and felt like a fraud. At night, I'd sit in my father's study, my study now, and look at that photo of us from my boot camp graduation, his hand on my shoulder, both of us smiling. I'd wonder if he'd already been planning it then, if he'd looked at his son in uniform and seen a business opportunity. The rational part of me knew that wasn't fair, knew that people were complicated, that my father had probably loved me and used me simultaneously, that human beings contained multitudes of contradictions. But the part of me that carried Rodriguez's body didn't care about nuance. I ran into Lieutenant Hayes at a VA appointment 2 years after I'd burned the documents. He'd retired after our second deployment, taken a job teaching history at a community college. We got coffee afterward, spent an hour catching up on the normal stuff, marriages, kids, jobs, the way civilian life never quite fit right after the Corps. "You doing okay?" he asked finally. "You seem, I don't know, different." "I inherited some money," I said, "from my father. He passed 3 years ago." "That's good, right? Financial security?" "Yeah, it's good." He studied me. Hayes had always been good at reading his men. "But—" I almost told him, almost laid it all out, the documents, the corruption, my father's role in our deployment. Almost asked him if he remembered fighting those orders to patrol Sodder City, if he ever wondered why we'd been sent there undermanned and under-equipped. Instead, I said, "Nothing, just miss him sometimes, you know? Complicated relationship." "Aren't they all?" Hayes said. We finished our coffee, promised to stay in touch, both knew we wouldn't. As I drove home, I thought about Patricia Chen's question. What would Rodriguez and the others say about me taking the money? I'd told myself they'd understand, that they'd want me to take care of my family, that they'd see it as me finally winning something after losing so much. But I didn't actually believe that. I thought Rodriguez would look at me with those dark eyes that saw everything and ask why I'd chosen money over honor. Thought Miller would shake his head in disappointment. Thought Chen, always the moral center of our squad, would tell me I'd become exactly what we'd fought against. Thought Davidson, who'd talked constantly about the rich contractors getting wealthy off our sacrifice, would call me a traitor. I pulled over on the side of the highway and cried for the first time since my father's funeral. Not for him, for the man I'd been before I opened that safe, for the version of myself who would have done the right thing no matter the cost. That man was gone now. In his place was someone who'd traded integrity for stability, who'd chosen comfort over justice, who'd taken blood money and convinced himself it was somehow different because it came through inheritance. I'd become my father after all. Emma turned 16 last month. Honor student, varsity soccer player, already talking about college, about veterinary school, about the future she wants to build. Sarah watches her with pride and love and everything a mother should feel watching her daughter thrive. And I watch too, knowing Emma's opportunities came at a price, that every tuition payment, every new laptop, every college visit tour is funded by money that flowed through contracts that put men like Rodriguez in harm's way. Sarah and I have found our way back to each other, mostly. She doesn't talk about the money anymore, doesn't ask if I still think about the documents I burned. We've built a life in my father's house, filled it with memories that have nothing to do with him, pretended that fresh paint and new furniture could somehow cleanse what this place represents. But she knows, and I know she knows. There's a space between us now that wasn't there before, a gap built from compromise and moral flexibility and the slow erosion of the man she married. Sometimes I wonder if I should have done it differently, exposed the corruption and lived with the consequences, refused the money and stayed in our small house with its broken appliances and constant financial stress, chosen honor over comfort.
But then Emma comes home excited about a school project, or Sarah mentions being able to finally take that vacation we'd always talked about. And I tell myself I made the right choice, that providing for your family isn't a sin, that refusing the money wouldn't have changed anything except making us poor and bitter. I tell myself a lot of things these days. The truth is simpler and harder. I chose. I weighed my father's sins against my daughter's future, and I decided that her opportunities mattered more than his crimes, that my comfort mattered more than justice for the men who didn't make it home. I learned that some truths don't set you free. They just give you something new to carry, and I carry it every day. The weight of knowing exactly what I am and what I traded to get here. My father left me everything when he passed, including proof that my deployment wasn't random, including evidence that could have exposed a network of corruption that stretched from military contractors to the Senate floor, including a choice I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. I chose wrong. I know that. But Emma's college is paid for, Sarah doesn't have to work 2 jobs, and we have the kind of stability I never dreamed we'd have. The men I served with are still gone. The corruption still exists, probably under different names with different faces. And I'm still here, living in my father's house, spending his money, trying to convince myself that surviving with compromise is better than dying on principle. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm just a coward who found a way to justify his cowardice. Either way, I have to look at myself in the mirror every morning, have to see my father's eyes looking back at me, have to live with the knowledge that when it mattered most, I chose exactly what he would have chosen. Legacy, they call it. The things we pass down, the choices that define who we are. My father passed me his fortune, and I'm passing Emma a future built on blood money that I pretended was clean enough to spend. Some inheritances you can't refuse, and some you refuse to refuse. I still don't know which one this was.